is another reason why Caitlin Clark needs to flee the WNBA. It's a political organization. They're not serious about business. They don't care about traditional sports fans. It's a little cult that puts out little political statements, and everybody wears vote t-shirts. They don't care about making money. They don't care really about building up this league and making it profitable. They're a charity. She needs to flee the WNBA and start her own league.
The biggest star in women's basketball just walked away from over $1 million, and the WNBA is absolutely panicking in a move that has sent shockwaves through professional sports. Caitlin Clark rejected what insiders called a Messi-style contract offer that would have made her one of the highest paid female athletes in history. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. This wasn't a mistake. It was the most calculated power play in sports history. Picture this. You're offered more money than you've ever dreamed of, complete ownership equity in a revolutionary new league, and the chance to escape a system that treats you like a cash machine while paying you peanuts. Any rational person would say yes immediately. Clark said no, and that single word is now threatening to bring down the entire WNBA power structure. The ripple effects are biblical. Federal investigators are asking serious questions about civil rights violations. The players' union just tore up their contract 3 years early. Media executives are watching their golden goose potentially fly away forever. And at the center of it all is one woman who just proved that sometimes the most powerful move isn't taking the money, it's walking away from it entirely. If you want to understand how one rejection could expose decades of corruption and potentially revolutionize professional women's sports forever, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about power, politics, and the price of speaking truth to authority. The offer that landed on Caitlin Clark's table wasn't just generous, it was revolutionary, unrivaled. The upstart 3-on-3 basketball league, co-founded by WNBA stars Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, put together what insiders called a Messi-style contract worth over $1 million for just 8 to 10 weeks of basketball, complete with equity ownership in the league. To put this in perspective, this single offer dwarfed Clark's entire 4-year WNBA contract. Her WNBA rookie salary was a mere $76,535 in 2024, making the unrivaled offer worth more than 13 times her official league earnings. The mathematics of exploitation had never been more stark. The deal included not just the base salary, but bonuses, revenue sharing from media rights deals with TNT, and most importantly, equity in the league itself. This wasn't just a contract, it was an invitation to ownership, to power, to a seat at the table that the WNBA had never offered her. Despite her astronomical impact on their revenue streams, the message was unmistakable. While the WNBA treated her as a replaceable cog in their machine, Unrivaled was offering her the keys to an empire. For someone generating sellout crowds and record-breaking television ratings while taking home less than a mid-level accountant, the decision seemed obvious to everyone watching. Then came the move that stunned the sports world, despite Unrivaled's full-court press to convince her, including the 7-figure offer for an 8-week season. Clark said no. When pressed for her reasoning, Clark told Time magazine that she didn't rule out doing it in the future. But this year is just not the best for me. It's going to be good for me to do my own thing and have my own space. On the surface, this explanation seemed almost casual, but the implications were seismic. This wasn't about rest or personal time. This was about leverage. By rejecting what appeared to be the perfect escape from WNBA's systematic undervaluation, Clark accomplished something no contract negotiation could have achieved. She transformed herself from a player seeking fair compensation into a symbol of systemic exploitation. The rejection wasn't financial suicide, it was strategic warfare. In one move, she shifted the entire narrative from talented players seeking better opportunities to exploited star making ultimate sacrifice to expose corruption. The media couldn't ignore it, fans couldn't dismiss it, and most importantly, federal authorities couldn't overlook it. The sacrifice gave her story the moral authority that no amount of money could buy. The rejection's most explosive consequence came when the federal government entered the conversation. Former White House staffer Sean Mullen publicly called for a federal investigation into the WNBA, arguing that Clark's targeting may reflect a culture of disparate treatment, and the evidence provides reasonable cause for a federal probe into potential civil rights violations. The Wall Street Journal published a piece titled "The WNBA and Caitlin Clark's Civil Rights," arguing that Clark has been subject to a hostile workplace due to how referees have called physical plays against her dating back to her rookie season. The evidence supporting these allegations is disturbing. Reports indicate Clark has been hit with 6 flagrant fouls in just her first season, a number that some veterans don't accumulate in their entire careers. The targeting appears systematic rather than coincidental, with deliberate body checks, hard fouls, and dangerous plays that have resulted in multiple injuries and missed games. ESPN's Stephen A. Smith weighed in with a stark warning to the WNBA, declaring they have a case, referring to the potential for federal intervention. When competitors themselves admit the league's biggest star isn't being protected, the allegations move from speculation to documented reality. Are you seeing the bigger picture here? Drop a comment below with your thoughts on whether federal intervention is necessary, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's really happening behind the scenes. The targeting wasn't limited to the court. The Olympic team selection process revealed the depth of the league's political machinery. Working against Clark, despite her undeniable talent and massive popular appeal, she was left off the 2024 Olympic roster in what insiders describe as a predetermined political decision. The spot that should have gone to the league's brightest star was instead given as a farewell gift to veteran Diana Taurasi, a player past her competitive prime. The decision makers weren't concerned with fielding the best possible team. They were terrified of Clark's popularity overshadowing the established hierarchy. The reasoning behind the snub was even more telling than the decision itself. Officials reportedly feared the backlash if Clark was included, but didn't receive significant playing time. Rather than risk her star power eclipsing the veterans, they chose to exclude her entirely. This wasn't about basketball merit. It was about preserving power structures. When Clark's coach delivered the news, her response was prophetic. They woke a monster. This wasn't just defiance. It was a declaration that the systematic attempts to humble her had only strengthened her. Resolved to change the system entirely. The true scope of Clark's impact became undeniable when examining the viewership data. With Clark playing, WNBA games averaged 1.81 million viewers, representing unprecedented audience engagement for the league. Arenas sold out, merchandise flew off shelves, and for the first time in decades, women's basketball was dominating national sports headlines. The league was experiencing growth it had never achieved in its 27-year history, all centered around one player they refused to properly compensate or protect. But the moment Clark stepped away due to injuries, the illusion shattered. During the 10 games she missed, viewership collapsed by a catastrophic 55%, plummeting to just 847,000 viewers. This wasn't a temporary dip, it was a free fall that terrified networks, advertisers, and sponsors. The data proved what everyone suspected, but the league refused to acknowledge. The WNBA wasn't surviving because of institutional strength or collective star power. It was surviving because of one player carrying the entire organization on her shoulders. Yet instead of building around their singular asset, they treated her as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a cornerstone to be protected, and celebrated Clark's strategic rejection created the perfect storm for systemic change. Almost immediately after her decision became national news, the WNBA Players Union made an unprecedented move. They opted out of their collective bargaining agreement 3 years early. The contract that was supposed to hold until 2027 was torn up in a single statement, with Union President Nika Agwumai calling it a defining moment and warning that players could no longer afford to stand still. This wasn't coincidence, it was coordination. Clark's sacrifice had provided the union with undeniable proof of systemic exploitation. They could now point to her story and argue that if even the league's biggest star, the one generating all the revenue and attention, was being systematically undervalued and targeted, what hope did other players have? Her rejection became their rallying cry, the perfect weapon to justify the nuclear option. By ripping up the collective bargaining agreement, they put everything on the table: revenue sharing, salary caps, endorsements, television money. All of it suddenly negotiable. The players weren't asking anymore. They were demanding their fair share of the empire they had built. The WNBA now finds itself trapped in a crisis entirely of its own making. While various commentators have called for investigations, no confirmed federal civil rights probe has been publicly announced. But the threat alone has created unprecedented pressure. On one side, federal investigators are circling with accusations of hostile workplace environments and potential civil rights violations. Subpoenas could expose years of internal communications, private conversations, and policies the league never intended for public scrutiny. On the other side, the players' union rebellion threatens to shut down operations entirely if their demands aren't met. This isn't negotiation, this is revolution. The union has made it clear that the old system of exploitation and control is over. They want their fair share of revenues, better working conditions, and real protection for their stars. Caught in the middle is the very player they tried to humble, now holding more power than anyone in the organization. organization's history. The system they built to control Clark is being dismantled by her strategic brilliance. The panic inside WNBA headquarters is palpable as every available option presents existential risks. Do they admit their failures, finally protect their biggest star, and beg for forgiveness? Such an admission would validate years of criticism and potentially open them to massive liability. Do they double down and use their media allies to paint Clark as selfish, difficult, and dangerous to the game? This strategy risks further alienating their only proven revenue generator and providing more ammunition for federal investigators. The league's response options have narrowed to a series of increasingly desperate gambles. They could attempt to appease Clark with a massive contract extension, but this would require admitting they've been systematically undervaluing her, while creating precedent for other players to demand similar treatment. They could try to discredit her by highlighting her support for certain investigations, but this risks appearing petty and vindictive. Every path forward requires the league to acknowledge that their golden goose has become their greatest existential threat and that the power dynamic has shifted irreversibly in her favor. The most devastating aspect of this entire saga is that the WNBA created their own crisis through systematic misjudgment of Clark's intelligence and strategic thinking. They assumed they could use her star power while keeping her contained within their traditional power structure. They believed they could cash in on her popularity while refusing her the respect, protection, and compensation she deserved. They thought they could humble her through targeting and exclusion without consequences. Instead, they awakened something they were never prepared to face. Clark didn't just refuse their attempts at control, she weaponized them. Every slight became evidence, every underpayment became proof of exploitation, every injury from targeting became grounds for federal investigation. She transformed their systematic mistreatment from quiet industry knowledge into national scandal. The league wanted a compliant superstar who would generate revenue without demanding power. Instead, they created a strategic mastermind who turned their own weapons against them with devastating effectiveness. As the saga reaches its crescendo, the WNBA faces a fundamental question. Can they survive the monster they created? Clark's rejection of the $1 million offer wasn't the end of her strategy, it was the beginning. She has successfully transformed herself from exploited employee to industry power broker, from revenue generator to system disruptor. The federal investigation calls, union rebellion, and media scrutiny are all direct consequences of her calculated sacrifice. The league now stands at an inflection point that will determine not just their immediate survival, but their long-term relevance. In professional sports, they can continue fighting Clark and face the consequences of opposing their only proven star, or they can capitulate to her demands and risk losing control of their organization entirely. But perhaps the most terrifying possibility for league executives is that Clark has already won. She has exposed their exploitation, challenged their authority, and proven that she doesn't need them as much as they need her. The question isn't whether the WNBA can survive this storm, it's whether they can survive Caitlin Clark herself. The power dynamics in professional sports have fundamentally shifted, and this is just the beginning. What do you think happens next? Will the WNBA finally treat their stars fairly, or will this crisis bring the entire system down? Let us know in the comments. Smash that like button if this opened your eyes to what's really happening, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories the leagues don't want you to know. The monster is awake, and it's not going back to sleep.